Look at what housing actually costs you. The rent that takes the first week of every month before you've bought a single thing. The down payment you keep saving toward that somehow drifts further away as the pile grows. The listing that sold above asking before you finished reading it. Every year, the same direction. Up. The obvious explanation is that too many people want to live where you live, and there aren't enough homes. That's true. It's also the shallow end. What's less obvious is that the shortage isn't a fact of nature. It's a decision, made over and over, by people you'll never meet, in rooms you'll never sit in. Here's the mechanism. Housing is one of the few things we all need that we've made nearly impossible to produce more of on demand. Not because we ran out of land or lumber, but because the right to build gets rationed. Understand that, and the price of a home stops reading like a number the market handed you. It starts reading like a bill, for permission granted or denied long before you showed up. Start with the version of this you already trust, the one that works almost everywhere else. When demand for something rises, its price rises. That higher price is a signal. It tells producers there's money to be made, so they make more of the thing, and the new supply pushes the price back down until it settles somewhere reasonable. Coffee, phones, flights, televisions. This loop runs quietly under nearly every market you touch. When a price spikes and stays high, that's supposed to be a flare going up, pulling in new supply until the pressure releases. Housing is supposed to work the same way. Prices climb, builders build, the shortage eases, and the whole thing self-corrects before it ever becomes a crisis. So why doesn't the flare work? Here's where housing quietly breaks the model you just accepted. Two things make housing different from almost everything else you buy. The first is that a house is welded to a piece of land, and land does not move. You cannot manufacture homes where they're cheap and ship them to where they're expensive. A vacant lot in a struggling town does nothing for a family priced out of a booming one. The second difference is the one that actually matters, and it's the one nobody puts on a flyer. The right to build on a piece of land is not something you simply own. It's something you're granted. And what can be granted can be withheld. Economists have a word for how much supply can respond to price: elasticity. In some cities, supply is elastic. Prices rise, permits get issued, cranes go up. The market builds outward and upward, and prices stay tethered to what it actually costs to put up a building. In other cities, supply is stuck. Prices can double, triple, detach from gravity entirely, and the amount of new housing barely moves. The pattern has held for decades. The metros that kept their rules simple kept building, and their prices stayed within reach of an ordinary income. The metros that layered on rule after rule watched prices lift clean off from wages, not for a bad season, but as a permanent condition. In those places, the price of a home floats far above the cost of the land, plus the cost to build the structure sitting on it. Economists have measured that gap directly, and it has a name. They call it a regulatory tax. It is, quite literally, the price of permission, and in the most locked-down markets, it can be worth more than the house. Notice what that implies. In the priciest metros, the bare dirt under a plain, unremarkable home can be worth more than the home standing on it. And that dirt isn't precious because of anything in the soil. It's precious because of the permission stapled to it. You're not really bidding on land. You're bidding on the rare, government-issued right to put a home there at all. Now, before you file that away as just how housing works, slow, expensive, impossible, sit with one fact that should bother you. Because we were once spectacularly good at this. After the Second World War, America had a housing shortage that makes anything you've lived through look gentle. Millions of veterans came home to cities with nowhere to put them. People were living in converted garages, in barns, in parked trolley cars. And the country's response was simply to build. In 1947, on a stretch of old potato fields on Long Island, a developer named William Levitt broke ground on what became Levittown. He ran home construction like a reverse assembly line, one crew pouring foundations, the next framing, the next roofing, each team moving house to house down the block. At peak, his crews finished a new home roughly every 16 minutes, 17,000 houses in about 4 years. A veteran could buy one for around $8,000, sometimes with nothing down. Demand exploded and supply exploded to meet it. The flare fired exactly the way the textbook promised. Hold on to that, because it's the crack in the whole "we can't" story. Fast, affordable, large-scale housing is not science fiction. We have done it at enormous scale, within living memory. It isn't that we forgot how. The blueprints still exist. The machines still work. What changed is not our ability to build. It's the number of people who now have to say yes before a single shovel touches dirt. And it's worth being honest that the post-war boom had an ugly engine underneath it, because it's the same mechanism we're tracing. Levittown and developments like it were built with racial covenants, contract clauses that locked non-white families out by law, backed by federal lending rules that did the same. That's not a footnote here. It's the theme in an older key. Housing rules in this country have almost always been about controlling who gets in, not just how much gets built. The tool eventually changed, from an explicit covenant to a quiet line in a zoning code. But the underlying move, using the rules to keep the wrong people out and the values up, never really left. So what multiplied the number of people who can say no? Follow it back and you arrive at zoning. In 1926, the Supreme Court heard a case called Euclid versus Ambler Realty, and it ruled that a town had the constitutional right to dictate what could be built where, to carve its land into zones and rule whole categories of building out of existence. That decision cracked the door open, and zoning walked through it into nearly every city in the country. Today, in a great many American cities, the majority of residential land is reserved for single-family houses by law. On most of the map, it is simply illegal to build anything denser than one detached home per lot. Now layer on the rest of the code. Minimum lot sizes, height caps, parking requirements, setback rules, environmental review, permitting timelines that stretch into years. Each rule, on its own, sounds reasonable. Someone can stand up and defend any single one of them with a straight face. But they don't operate one at a time. They stack. And stacked high enough, a pile of individually reasonable rules becomes a wall. The map has a fixed number of build slots, and someone else is holding the keys. Now, here's the part almost nobody connects to the rest. Who writes these rules? Local government. Who shows up to the zoning meetings? Who actually votes in the sleepy local elections that decide them? Overwhelmingly, the people who already own homes in that town. And for most of them, that home isn't just where they live. It's the single largest asset they own, often worth more than everything else they have, combined. It's a huge bet, it can't be diversified, and its value rises when housing stays scarce. So the people with the most power over whether new supply gets built are, to a remarkable degree, the exact people who lose money when it does. An economist gave this its own name, the homevoter. The idea is simple and a little unsettling once it clicks. Your house is the biggest, least hedged financial position most people will ever hold, and human beings defend a position that size fiercely. This isn't a smoke-filled room conspiracy. It's an incentive doing precisely what incentives always do. It isn't villainy, it's min-maxing. Every homeowner is just playing the board in front of them, and the board pays out for scarcity, and the system hands them the tools to act on it. A single new building can be tied up for years. Design review, public comment periods, environmental challenges, appeals, hearings that beget more hearings. And in that maze, a small handful of committed neighbors can delay a project into the ground without ever formally killing it. Delay is denial. A development that eats 5 extra years of process usually just dies of its own carrying costs. So you never need a majority to block housing. You need a motivated few and a process with enough doors to knock on, which is exactly where this reaches into your own account. That rent that eats the first week of your month, that purchase price you're stretching and straining to hit. A real slice of it isn't the market in some neutral weather-like sense. It's the deliberate output of a system that's been quietly optimized by people whose net worth depends on your housing staying expensive. You're not paying a shortage, you're paying a design, which raises the obvious objection. And the answer to it is the sharpest turn in the whole story. Most people, when they hear block new housing, picture blocking luxury towers, glass condos, rooftop pools, units they'd never buy anyway. So who cares? Let the rich fight over the shiny buildings. Here's who cares: housing filters. A home built brand new and expensive today does not stay the newest, priciest option on the block forever. Give it 20 or 30 years. A flashier building goes up down the street. The new one quietly becomes the old one. And today's premium apartment ages into tomorrow's merely fine, more affordable one. The place the next family down the ladder can finally reach. Nearly every affordable older unit in your city was once somebody's brand new expensive one. Sit with what that means, because it inverts the whole debate. When a town blocks the expensive building today, it isn't only refusing luxury, it's deleting the affordable home that building would have become a generation from now. The shortage of cheap housing you feel this very year is, in large part, the ghost of construction that quietly never happened decades ago. You are paying today for buildings that got voted down before you were old enough to sign a lease, and it compounds. Every year of blocked construction is another missing rung that won't exist for the people coming up behind you. So tally the winners and the losers, because the split is clean. The winners are everyone who already owns. They're holding an asset the rules keep deliberately making rarer, and rarer is the whole point. Scarcity is their dividend. The losers are the renters, the first-time buyers, the young, the mobile, anyone who needs to arrive somewhere new to build a life. And here's the quiet, uncomfortable truth underneath all of it. For the people who actually set the rules, this system is not broken. It is not failing to deliver, it is working exactly as intended. Once you know that's there, the whole thing gets bigger than your rent. Housing scarcity is a wealth transfer, slow, silent, continuous, running from the people who don't own toward the people who do. And it's a brake on the entire economy in a way that reaches even people who think they're winning. The highest paying jobs in the country cluster in exactly the cities where housing is most tightly rationed. So the places where you could earn the most are the same places you can least afford to live. Someone who could double their income by moving stays put, because once you subtract the rent, the raise evaporates before it reaches them. Now multiply that by millions of people who never make the move, never take the better job, never start the company they would have started. A country that can't build housing where its opportunity actually is slowly becomes a country where the zip code you were born into decides more about your life than your talent ever will. And because a home is how most families in this country build wealth in the first place, the gap between the people who got in and the people who are locked out doesn't just persist. It hardens and it passes down. The result is an economy that quietly sorts people less by what they can build or do, and more by whether they happened to buy in before the door closed. That's the full map, not a housing market that merely happens to be expensive. A machine, one that's been converting a basic human need into a protected private asset, on purpose, one zoning meeting at a time. If this is the kind of breakdown you're here for, taking a system everyone complains about and quietly walking you through the actual gears turning underneath it, subscribe to 8-Bit Economics. No hype, no predictions, nobody telling you to panic buy anything. Just the underlying code of the systems that run your financial life, whether you're watching them or not. If this changed how you'll read the next rent increase or the next listing that sold in a weekend, like it. And drop a comment with the housing rule where you live that makes the least sense. I read them. Because by the time everyone sees it coming, the smart play is already over. So the next time a headline pins the housing shortage on interest rates or population or the market, you'll recognize those for what they are. The surface. Underneath sits something simpler and stranger. We didn't run out of room. We decided in 1,000 quiet rooms that certain things are worth more precisely when there aren't enough of them to go around. And then we made very sure there wouldn't be. The shortage was never the weather, it's the architecture. And the useful thing about architecture is that it can be redrawn by whoever bothers to read the blueprint first.